Welcome to the Genealogy Happy Hour, a place where new family historians can learn to document their family histories and celebrate their new discoveries. I'm Amy.
And I'm Penny, and we're here to help you discover your family tree from the beginning. Welcome to episode 109. We are going to be navigating passenger lists and records.
Navigating, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. But first, before we hit the seas, do we have a wine, Amy?
Actually, we do not have a wine. I know. I just came back from Munich, so I've been drinking beer, Bavarian beer. So we're going to be talking about Bavarian beer today.
Okay, it's still happy hour.
It's still happy hour.
We can drink whatever we want,
correct,
right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we're drinking Bavarian beer. Hofbrau, went to the Hofbrauhaus, had dinner, had some beer, and we didn't get to go to the Andechs Monastery Brewery. It's the oldest monastery continuing brewery in Bavaria, but I got to taste some of the beer at their restaurant in Munich.
Excellent.
So I prefer the dark beer, the Dunkel beer. Had some Doppelbock Dunkel, which is a little bit heavier in alcohol content.
Double Dunkel. Okay.
Yeah. But they also have Helles if you prefer lighter beer. You know, we wanted somebody in our group, they were drinking the lighter beer. So anyway, so we're featuring Bavarian beer.
Excellent.
For this episode, and it kind of goes with passenger lists, and
sure does.
Importing beer into beer making into the United States. How about that?
All right.
But first, I think we have a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Break down genealogy brick walls with a subscription to the largest online newspaper archive. Did you know newspapers.com has over 1 billion pages of digitized newspapers dating back to 1690? Their growing collection includes newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond. Discover birth and marriage announcements, obituaries, and everyday stories about your ancestors in seconds. Newspapers.com can help you fill in the gaps between vital records and reveal details about your ancestors' lives that you can't find anywhere else. Their easy-to-use search feature lets you filter your results by date, location, specific paper, and more. When you find something interesting, newspapers.com makes it a snap to share with your family and friends. You can even save it directly to your ancestry tree. Come explore 1 billion pages and make infinite discoveries today on newspapers.com. Use promo code HAPPYHOUR for a 20% discount on your subscription.
Every name on a passenger list represents a human story of courage, hope, and new beginnings. And that is a quotation from a U.S. president. And it's so true. It's so true. And I think we can get a lot of information about our ancestors if we can find them on these passenger lists.
Yeah. Well, and it is a story because, I just came back from Munich, and that was, a 10-hour airplane ride. But, this is days or weeks on a vessel in steerage, packed in with a whole bunch of other people for a longer period of time. So that definitely, they all had stories.
I am just a little bit off track, reading a book on James Cook's last sail, and the description of the animals that they bring on, and I just cannot imagine
the smell.
But
yeah.
So I'm glad I wasn't living in that time.
Right.
Thank you. All right. So what exactly are passenger lists?
And why are they important to genealogy?
Yeah. So they are official records documenting the individual who traveled on a ship or later an aircraft from one country to another. And there's different ports of entry. We always have to look at we can't just assume everybody came into New York, because that's not true.
Right.
So in the beginning, there's pre-1820.
Right. Yes.
What do we got?
Well, they're mostly in books, compilations. I have an ancestor who came into Philadelphia on the ship Friendship in 1727, and that passenger list, which basically just lists the males that were on the ship, is in a compilation, a book. So you need to go to the library. You need to look on to see what possibly wherever your ancestors coming from during that time period, where that might have a researcher may have already gone through those records, and that may even be lost at this point, and recorded them at that in a book format. They're not going to be digitized for the most part. Yeah.
So after that, 1820 to 1890, you've got the customs passenger list, which was basically put together for statistical information by the captain, had your basic info, name, sex, age, and
probably I think there's I think there's occupation, and then where you're from, and where you're from is just simply France, Germany, Poland, Bohemia, whatever. That's it.
Right.
Very basic. Coming into the United States.
Yes, it isn't till the 1890s or 1890 to 1950 that we have that enhanced immigration passenger list, which now includes a physical description, birthplaces, last residence, relatives' names, addresses, and like who are you coming? Who paid your passage? Sometimes that's always interesting too.
Right. How much money they had coming in, what their health conditions are. It even has a description, what their eye color was, their stature, their hair color, and whether they were detained, whether they were allowed to come through. Sometimes you'll find it your ancestor and they have a line through their name, which means they didn't make the vessel, or they were pulled off, so they didn't get on the vessel to begin with. Right. So, but there are a couple exceptions from 1813 to 1819, and New Orleans, there are passenger lists available for that port, and then Philadelphia 1800 to 1819. So before that, in 1820, the United States government required all ship captains and masters of vessels to present a list of passengers, but they didn't really say what it needed to be other than the list of passengers.
Here's your list. Yeah.
Yes. But it's nice because not the children are listed, everybody is listed. So, we don't have census records for that time period for everybody in the household, but we do have that list coming in.
Yes.
So that's nice.
That is nice, for sure. I know I've got a couple from the 1848 and 1850 that have the whole list of the family on there, and then I can look at later census records to match them up.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So why do passenger lists matter to your research? Well, they identify the exact place of origin. Where is your...
And that's one of the biggest things there is that you have to be able to, to start your research in Europe, you have to know exactly where they were from. Germany, that doesn't, Poland, Bohemia. You can't
figure out what that town is.
You've got to find those towns.
Yes, and like we just mentioned, connecting the family groups who traveled together, revealing relationships through contact information. Who did they leave behind? It might mention that.
Yes, and it will say, is it a friend, or is it a mother, a father? It will give that relationship and the town that they're living in. So that's a great place then for you to start.
Yeah.
And have possibly...
And you might learn a new name that
Correct.
way too.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And then who they're coming to see. So they have to have a contact here. Most of the time they have contacts here in the U.S. And that's a great place to start if you're looking for them in a census, because especially immigrants, they moved around so much when they first got here. It's a great first place to look for that address in the next census coming up to see if they're there.
Yes.
Or the person who was there might be, a relative, and then you can start jump from there.
And I know on one of the ones I found, it was the 1868 entry. This couple, when you look at the list, I can see two brothers that had come over at the same time. Yes, even though they weren't like right on top of each other, they were all around. I'm like, okay, it's a different German name. I shouldn't say different German name, but I knew that they were brothers from research I've done, but it was interesting to see them all there. But I also noticed in my direct ancestry, the couple that I was looking at had a young son who was 9 months old who died on the ship.
Oh,
and
wow.
that was listed there. It was just, had died. So
it was recorded. The death was recorded on right on the passenger list. That's
so
cool.
That child would never show up in a census. I'd never know
that there was another child.
That they had that child.
Yeah.
Right. So Amy, when we're we're talking about all the great things you can find in these passenger lists, but we got to find the passenger list first. And the best places are, of course, our online databases, our Ancestry, if you have an Ancestry membership, and of course, if you don't, go to the library, use it for free.
I like Ancestry the best for this type of research.
Family Search also has access to many passenger lists. The Ellis Island Foundation.
Right.
You're not a big fan?
I'm not a big fan. Well, for two reasons. One, Ellis Island immigration didn't start until the late 1890s there, and so but it's hard. The search is hard. I think you putting names in, it just is very hard to search there. And most of the time, those passenger lists are also on Ancestry anyway. The time that I have had success is if you know the vessel that they came in on, and you just can't find them, but you still have to go page by page by page looking for them. But I haven't had.
I will agree and disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
I do like that site. I don't think it's difficult to use, but you have to have the exact name.
Correct.
And I was just looking up a person for a friend. The father's name was Henry, and when he came in, it was Heinrich. So me putting Henry in the last name is going to get me nowhere on that
Right.
website.
Yeah.
They don't do anything like sounds like, or so I agree with that. But I have found records on there. Let's see some other ones. Find My Past has a strong collection of UK, Irish, and Australian passenger records.
On Ellis Island too, don't you have to pay to download the images?
No.
You
You can pay to order a copy.
Okay.
Like I have ordered a copy
from there
to have framed.
Right. Yeah.
My grandmother, she came over and she's listed there with her family. So we ordered a copy of the ship with the record that we could.
Okay, but you can download for free. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, My Heritage, Castle Garden, which the records are also on Ancestry.
Right.
And then Immigrant Ships Transcribers Guild, which is a great site. I just personally have a hard time navigating that site, but that's another great place to go. And of course, like you mentioned before, the books, look in the National Archives, your library.
For the compilations.
For the compilations.
For the older ones, But the other thing you can do is if you're having a hard time on Ancestry trying to find the person, because the handwriting can be quite difficult sometimes on these passenger lists, and sometimes you'll find the naturalization record first, which will give the name of the ship, and then you go and find that ship, and you go, what's the date that it landed here, and then you go page by page, and then usually you're able to figure it out from there. They've probably just been transcribed incorrectly. So there's a way to back into it as well.
Yeah, right.
To find them. And the wonderful thing about them is that, especially the ones that are later that have all the information, they're usually 2 pages. So it's very important you figure out which line your ancestor is coming in on, which line they're recorded on. But it can be very tricky when you get to who they're coming to see and the person that they left in the old country. And because I've gotten where you just have to really just determine, because it's a 2-liner usually, and sometimes the way that they've written them, it looks like your person's contacts are actually with the line below it or the line above it, and so you just really have to be very careful and discern which individuals are your people.
Yeah, so you do not want to be transcribing somebody else's information into your family.
And it's not always straight across, so be careful with that. Be careful with that.
Okay, so there are, I think mostly we're talking here about the inbound passenger list.
Yes, we are right now. Coming into New York, but also remember, New York wasn't, like you just said, the only port. A lot of people came into Maryland, Boston, New Orleans, where else? On San Francisco.
Canada.
And the Canadian border crossing, where they came in by train or they came in, by foot. So
I have some of those. But the lists, when these passengers are coming in, to Ellis Island or wherever the
Castle Garden or wherever
they're going.
Yep.
they are handed this list, especially the pre-1890 from the captain. And those lists, well, I should say all the lists, are the names, the information on those lists is what is used to register them as they come in. So because a lot of people will say, oh, my ancestor's name was changed at Ellis Island.
Right.
And we
Which
all know
didn't happen.
that is not true now.
Yeah.
That is not true. They can change it as soon as they walk out the door, but not when they come in. And again, like looking for that Henry, and his name was Heinrich. You know, he changed it to Henry, but not till after he was in the country. So it can make it a little tricky. But there are also outbound lists.
Yes. And that's important to take a look at. When my grandfather and my great-grandparents came into the United States, they came in 1884. My grandfather was a year old. And it's just one of those basic passenger lists. Lists everybody, lists their ages, it lists my great-grandfather's occupation, and just says they're from Germany and where they're going. And that was it. But they outbound from Hamburg, because they were from Germany, the outbound from Hamburg, which is also on Ancestry, tells exactly where they were from in Germany. So by using both of them, I know when they entered the United States, but I also know when they left Germany, and I know exactly what little town they were from in Germany.
Very helpful.
You got to use both of those. And the outbound list, they're available for a lot of the UK, Scandinavian vessels that were leaving. Coming to the United States. If you use those hand in hand, you know the ship's name, that you can find that one in the Hamburg outbound, or where in UK, Portsmouth or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. How do we read and interpret these passenger lists? So we've found it, we've got it in front of us, and now we're trying to understand it, I guess. And like you said, you can browse by the ship date, check your multiple pages, reverse sides, and review the column headers. I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
Too. Make sure you know what you're looking at.
Yeah, and they changed over time.
Yeah. And I'm sure as time goes on and ships are different, and there's a lot of abbreviations and special notations on there that you need to familiarize yourself with, like SI is special inquiry.
Right.
H or W is husband or wife. That's kind of you can figure that out. F or M is father or mother. So there's a bunch of little things that you need to
look at the little handwritten notes sometimes, because if they were detained, let's say, or they were sick. I think a couple families I was researching, one of them, they got detained because it was the older couple, like the grandparents, and then their granddaughter coming in to meet their son and the father of the little girl, but they didn't have a lot of money, and so the government, the U.S. didn't want to let them in because they weren't going to be self-sustaining. They were going to be relying on their son, so he had to come and get them out of the detention to allow them to come into the country. So they got detained for a couple of days, I think.
Okay.
So you've got to look at those notes, and then they should be on then a detention list as well.
So maybe more information
Correct.
over there.
Yeah.
Yes. So research strategies for passenger lists. Do you know the exact arrival date or approximate arrival date and port? That's helpful. Otherwise we're just winging it, which most of us are.
To begin with.
Figure it out. Can you narrow your search by a certain time period? If you are looking at your ancestors in the census and you can see them at a certain day, hopefully the census will tell you. Like my one aunt in the 1910, it wrote down the exact year, 1868. Bang, I was able to find them on the Ellis Island site. But if they didn't write it down, or it's just listed as they've naturalized, you can try to find a naturalization record. But if you can't find that, at least try to narrow down the time period, maybe by the records that you already have. Search the alternative spellings. We already talked about that. Filter by age, and then include known traveling companions. If you know of another family that might have come in at the same time, maybe try to find them if you can't find your ancestor.
Or look when you find the passenger list, look above and below, because a lot of times families will travel together from the same village. So the people above them that are listed, are they from the same place? Maybe they're a relative or a cousin, or they just could be traveling together for safety.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
The other thing is, also understand the naming patterns in, let's say the European country, for example. Italian women keep their surnames. So the Italian women are going to be coming in under their maiden names rather than their husband's names. And here in Florida, I was doing some research, and in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of Italians would come in for seasonal work and then take their money and go back to Italy. So you see them coming, you might see your ancestor coming back and forth seasonally. Yeah. Or bringing other people back, going back, bringing more family members over as they could afford it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you see that, you might be wondering, like, why?
Why did they leave?
Why did they keep coming back? Yeah. Right, why did they leave? And why did they come back? And seasonal work. I know my great-grandfather came over several times, but he was working on a ship. Oh. So it was every time the ship came over, and then he finally brought his family over and stayed permanently. Right. Yeah. And
don't forget to also Google the ship that came in, and get a photograph. All of these ships, there's a photo online somewhere that you can download, and because that's, they stayed on that ship for a week, a couple days to weeks, and most of them came in steerage, so they're with a whole bunch of other people in that boat down underneath for a long time. So that's a part of their story as well as the actual ship.
Yeah. And if your ancestor came over, came to the United States, but you can't find them in those passenger lists, don't forget to look at the border crossings, like we talked about, the Canada border crossings. Right. That's where I found my husband's ancestors coming in across the border. There's also the Mexico border crossing, which is another one to look for as well. And you've talked about all the different alternative ports of entry. Be sure to check check them all.
Exactly.
We don't know everybody's story. We might think, of course, they would come to New York. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they came in through Baltimore.
Or New Orleans.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Also, I think what's fun, too, is to do a little research on the ship. What kind of ship was it? If you research that ship, you'll have a better understanding of the experience that your ancestor had when they came over. Yep. How big was it? What kind of lodging would they have? I think there's a lot of stuff we can find using these passenger lists.
But it really, the first thing you're looking for is the exact location of where they were from, and it may not say, it could just say that they're from Germany or they're German, but the person that they left behind is probably where they were from, and that's your first clue of where to look. So, and then looking for them in the United States is that person that they were coming to see, or their contact in the U.S. Yeah. So, and you'll be able to find more family members both ways.
Yes, of course. Passenger lists represent more than just administrative records. They capture moments of profound transition in our ancestors' lives, and they tell stories of courage and hope and determination. So if you have a passenger list story that you would like to share, we would love to see it in the comments of our blog post, and love to hear about your experience with a passenger list finding
your ancestors.
Yes.
So until next time,
cheers.
Thank you for listening. Please email us with any questions or comments at genealogyhappyhour@gmail.com.
Visit our website, www.genealogyhappyhour.com, for additional resources, books, and wines. Don't forget to drink responsibly
and never drink around genealogical documents.